Welcome back to the Vale Echo. Tonight we step into the fog-drenched corridors of a British noble estate, where elegance masked deceit and where every whisper carried the weight of temptation. Our story begins at dusk, as the sprawling Victorian mansion loomed beneath a heavy sky, its lamps flickering like nervous breaths. Guests arrived in polished carriages, unaware that behind those gilded doors lay a secret capable of shattering an entire aristocratic world. Inside the mansion, the air shimmered with candlelight. A grand ballroom unfolded, crystal chandeliers glowing above swirls of silk gowns, brass instruments, and the hushed murmur of society's elites. The nobleman of the house stood near a tall window, posture rigid, eyes distant. His expression was calm, but the candlelight revealed tension carved deep into his features. Something or someone had begun to unhinge the serenity of his perfect world. Across the ballroom, his wife laughed softly, her beauty capturing the room, but it wasn't her husband she kept glancing at. Her eyes drifted toward a refined, charming gentleman lingering near the marble pillars. Their gaze held a spark, subtle, forbidden, and intoxicating. A spark the nobleman had started noticing far too often. As the orchestra played, a discreet exchange took place. A note slipped from one gloved hand to another, barely visible yet dripping with secrecy. Its elegant script promised a rendezvous after the festivities. And while the couple tried to blend into the glittering crowd, the nobleman watched from the shadows of a corridor, his jaw tightening as he caught faint snippets of whispers that weren't meant for him. The true heart of the scandal pulsed in the mansion's quieter corners. In the candlelit library where towering shelves shielded endless secrets, the forbidden pair met briefly. They stood closer than propriety allowed, their words low and urgent, their silhouettes framed by the flickering firelight. Outside, rain began to patter against the tall windows as a carriage approached, its late arrival cloaked in mystery. The nobleman, meanwhile, paced in his private study. Firelight danced across scattered documents, but his mind was far from business. Rage, doubt, humiliation all collided within him. He was a man accustomed to control, yet this betrayal gnawed at him like a slow poison. And when his wife entered the room, the air thickened instantly. Their confrontation wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. The tremor in her voice, the storm in his eyes, and the unspoken truth between them carried more weight than any shouted accusation. In that moment, the nobleman realized the rumors weren't rumors anymore. His world, his pride, was slipping away. Meanwhile, in the moonlit garden behind the mansion, the wife's lover slipped through winding stone paths, avoiding watchful eyes. The rain-drenched night wrapped him in secrecy as he prepared for another clandestine moment. And inside the dining hall, velvet curtains hid the soft murmur of another whispered promise, another step deeper into a dangerous affair. What none of them knew was that everything they'd done tonight, the glances, the notes, the lies, was pushing the nobleman toward a moment from which none of them could return. The mansion had grown strangely silent, as if the walls themselves sensed the storm brewing within. The candle flames along the grand corridor flickered nervously, stretching shadows across the floor like warning signs. The nobleman walked slowly, each step echoing with the weight of unbearable suspicion. The rage he'd tried to contain all evening now surged through him with violent clarity. Moments ago, a servant had whispered something he could no longer ignore. His wife's lover had been seen slipping toward the far wing of the estate. In the privacy of his dimly lit study, he reached for the old-fashioned revolver resting inside a velvet-lined drawer. His hand trembled, not from fear but from the collision of heartbreak and fury. The metal felt cold, final, unforgiving. As the fireplace crackled behind him, his shadow stretched long across the room, twisting like the dark thoughts consuming him. Tonight he was no longer a man of decorum or title. He was a husband pushed past the brink. Meanwhile, in the mansion's darker corridors, footsteps whispered through the stillness. The lover moved cautiously, pausing near a slightly opened door, spilling warm lamplight into the hall. Perhaps he sensed danger, perhaps he merely felt the weight of the night, but something made him turn back. Before he could retreat, the door burst open with a violent crash. The nobleman stood in the threshold, eyes blazing, breath unsteady. The sight of the man who had dismantled his world ignited a fury he could no longer restrain. The confrontation ignited instantly. Shouts collided with the thunder outside, their silhouettes locked in a battle of rage and desperation. The lover tried to reason to back away, his hands raised slightly, but the nobleman lunged forward, fueled by betrayal. Their struggle crashed into furniture, sending a lamp tumbling and shadows dancing wildly across the walls. Every moment felt stretched, electric, charged with the inevitability of tragedy. Then came the sound that split the night, the revolver's deafening crack. A burst of sparks flashed, blinding for an instant. The mansion seemed to freeze. The lover staggered backward, his expression caught between shock and disbelief. He collapsed onto an ornate Persian carpet, his body framed by the soft glow of Victorian decor. The room's opulence made the scene even more haunting. For a heartbeat, the nobleman stood rigid, the revolver slipping slowly from his shaking hand. His fury drained as swiftly as it had risen, replaced by a hollow terror. He stared at what he had done, not a rival, not an intruder, but a man whose existence had shattered his pride and now his conscience. A scream tore through the silence. His wife burst into the room, silk dress flowing behind her, her expression contorted with horror. She fell to her knees beside the lifeless body, trembling, her hands hovering helplessly over the man she had once chosen in secrecy. Outside the chamber, servants hurried through the corridor, their footsteps frantic. Panic rippled through the mansion as the truth began to unravel, candle flames shivered, doors swung open. The night was no longer quiet, it was broken. And within the mansion's walls, the consequences of one moment of rage had only just begun. Dawn crept slowly toward the estate, but inside the mansion time felt frozen. The corridors were alive with hurried whispers, the kind that travel fast when fear grips every servant's heart. Outside, a police carriage rolled through the last of the night's fog, lanterns swaying as detectives stepped onto the wet gravel path. Their silhouettes cut through the pale morning light, bringing with them an air of grim authority. The tragedy inside had already begun to ripple long before they crossed the threshold. As they entered, the mansion felt colder than the autumn air outside. Servants gathered nervously along the hallways, eyes wide, hands trembling, each of them replaying the night's chaos in their minds. The detectives moved with quiet precision, their early forensic tools, magnifying glasses, notebooks, and small metal instruments, appearing almost out of place against the grandeur of Victorian luxury. In the grand room where the tragedy had unfolded, the scene remained eerily still. The lover's body lay on the ornate Persian carpet, the colors muted beneath the gray morning light. His lifeless form contrasted sharply with the elegant decor that surrounded him, as if a single violent act had ripped the very soul out of the mansion's beauty. Beside him, the nobleman sat in a chair, his posture rigid, revolver lying abandoned on the polished table. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, as though he had aged decades in a single night. A detective approached the revolver first, lifting it gently with gloved fingers. The brass glinted under the lamp, still warm with the past night's violence. He inspected its chamber carefully, studying the burn marks, tracing the fingerprints smudged across its surface. Every detail confirmed what the nobleman had not yet spoken aloud. Across the room, the nobleman's wife watched in silent devastation, her eyes red, her hands clutching the folds of her elegant but disheveled dress. No scream remained in her, no plea, no explanation, no justification. Only the crushing weight of consequences born of stolen glances, hidden meetings, and desires that had spiraled out of control. As dawn fully broke, newspapers across the city roared to life. Headlines stamped in heavy ink flew across the printing presses. British noble dead in scandalous affair. A secret love, a shattered honor, aristocratic tragedy that shocked the nation. The scandal spread with the speed of wildfire, reaching every street corner, every drawing room, every whispering circle of high society. The mansion's name, once synonymous with nobility and grandeur, was now forever linked with betrayal and bloodshed. By sunrise, the estate stood quiet once more. The detectives had left, the servants retreated to their quarters, and the nobleman was taken away in a carriage whose wheels cracked through the morning frost. The house, once alive with music, candlelight, and whispered promises, now felt abandoned, its windows dark, its soul fractured. Outside, the fog curled around the mansion like a lingering ghost, reluctant to leave. And as the first rays of light finally touched the estate's stone walls, it became clear that some stories do not fade, they stain. And so, the echoes of that night would haunt British aristocracy for generations, a reminder that even behind gilded walls, desire can be deadly.